Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wellzest podcast. I am thrilled because you guys are in for a treat. I've got Joshua Hale on today's episode. I'm going to read Joshua's full bio because Joshua is one of those people who I feel like is an absolute maverick. You've done so many things and I can't wait to just highlight everything that you've done. So Joshua Hale is an AI strategist, entrepreneur, and sustainability advocate who helps businesses scale using automation while promoting digital independence. A former DJ and restaurant industry veteran, he overcame addiction and built a successful consulting business that merges AI with self-reliant living. From running a 10-acre homestead, which is so cool, by the way, I want to talk about this, to leading mutual aid networks, he focuses on AI's real-world applications, its impact on privacy, and its environmental costs, while also exploring how technology can support sustainable lifestyles. Whoa, 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 whoa. You have done a lot. You've lived many lives. You're such a fascinating person, and I just can't wait to dive in. So welcome to the show, Joshua.
Well, I appreciate having you on or having me on. And this is a great area that I don't always get to talk about. It's like wellness and tech and like how those things work well together and like how you need to, be able to protect yourself so that you don't get it, overwhelmed.
Absolutely. I feel like you're one of the few voices in the space that's actually talking about this. Before the show, we were talking about how I used to actually work for a health and wellness startup up in Seattle. And there was a cool opportunity to start to drive the merge of wellness and tech. And I feel like you're just taking it to the next level, especially with everything that's happening with AI, which is cool. So what I want to do is this. I just want to take a step back or a few steps back and get to know young Joshua. I feel like you've lived multiple lives. You've been a DJ, you've worked in restaurants, you have a homestead, you're in tech. And your life has been this confluence of multiple different things, multiple influences. So tell me about young Joshua, who you were, what were some of those early influences, what were those experiences that really you think has shaped your life today?
Well, I think going back, I was raised in a pretty controlled religious household that didn't really equip me for the real world that was out there. Lo and behold, I rebelled when I was 16, and I kind of got cast out into the world. And there's kind of safeguards in religions where they expect you to kind of come, crawling back because the world is very hard for those not equipped for it. Well, I was very determined to figure this whole thing out, and I ended up kind of hanging out with the wrong crowd, you would say, but for me, it was an easy crowd to get in with, right? Because they like to, party late at night and have a good time. They're the expectations of friendships and boundaries were pretty low, right? If you did drugs and I did drugs, that means we're best friends, right? So that got myself in a lot of trouble, as you can imagine, and a lot of fun. But I got into a career of being a DJ. I moved downtown Seattle, and so I was staying up late, playing at clubs and playing at festivals. And that pretty much describes like my whole 20s.
Got it.
Through that process, I developed really horrendous bad habits. And when I got into my 30s, and we can jump back if you want to explore more about my colored past, but in my 30s, I finally started to get some foundation underneath me, learning how to meditate, learning to connect with myself, to where I was able to address these bad habits.
Wow. Wow. What if you don't have to share, but if you want to share, like what religious faith or discipline was it?
I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and
Got it.
so
Okay.
they're pretty stringent, especially I guess 25 years ago, and at that point, I was cast out of the religion, and so I was not allowed and excommunicated from my family and everyone that I knew.
Was your, and kind of knowing the process there, was your family, did they try to, I'm going to use the reel you in, like, hey, hey, you're gonna, and use tactics. I feel like, and I grew up Catholic, I feel like there are these tactics that are used in order to, I'll say, push someone in a direction that's, quite defined. Did you have that experience? Was there really tough talks with your family, where they were like, "Hey, this is what you've got to do," and they were really pressuring you, to live their life, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to talk about this stuff. So the Joe's Witness organization, they kind of use a lot of Orwellian speak, and I was
Right.
born into that religion, so I knew nothing else coming into this world, right? So I only knew what was taught to me, the worldview that was I was surrounded by, and they use words like the truth to really make me feel like that was the only choice, option, and worldview out there. And so once I started turning into my teens, right, and exploring the world a little bit, starting to get some my own autonomy, what really like broke the whole framework for me was that I fell in love, right? I was like 15, 16, falling in love for the first time. And I was essentially told that like I was not allowed to see this person that I was, completely infatuated with. And I couldn't get a straight answer like, why is being in love wrong? And I
Mm.
asked and asked and asked, and nobody would give me a good answer. And so when I was faced, with I was baptized when I was like 12 due to peer pressure in hindsight, right? All my friends were doing it. I really didn't understand the like contract I was, writing at that age. And so I was a baptized member of the church. And then when when I fell in love, a few years later, nobody could explain why being in love was wrong. And so I really stuck to my guns and my determination and said, well, like, if you can't explain this, then like, I don't want to be a part of this. So uh, even when they threatened me, as you were kind of pointing out, with social shunning and with outcasts of my whole social sphere, right? My blood family, all friends and family that I had grown and developed and depended upon, right? Because I wasn't allowed to hang out with anybody outside of the church.
Right.
So I was completely dependent. And I understand now as an adult why an organization might want to do that, right? Because it, keeps the flock together and keeps
Yep.
the organization multiplying. But as a 16-year-old, not understanding, how the world works, I, in hindsight, looking back, I'm glad I did. I stuck true to what I felt was true, and like nobody could explain why being in love was wrong. And so I stuck with that and was with that girl for quite a few years.
Let me ask this. So here you are in a position where your worldview has been shattered. You're, pretty much kicked out of the church, the life that you knew. What were those first few years like as you were, trying to find your way, trying to build your identity? What was that like? Were you scared? Were you, like, hey, I don't care. I don't give a flying. You know what? I'm just here, gonna do my own thing. Um, yeah, what was that like for you?
Well, it was super intense, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
because I was not taught critical thinking skills. I was not
Mm.
taught skills of entrepreneurship, right? How to like go out and provide value and make money. I was not taught communication skills. I was not taught, how to regulate my own emotions. I was in a very controlled dogma that I did what I was told, right? And so being cast out into the world, as I described it before, is meant to be very difficult for you. If you lack all those skills and don't have your own means of supporting yourself, let alone like the community that you thought, that you did have as support was no longer there. It's just designed to like make you come running back. Luckily, as I said, I'm very determined. And so I stuck with it. But as I started my whole story, right?
Right.
The only people, or like the easiest people to like connect myself to, were people that were like to party. They didn't have very they had low expectations for being friends, right? If you smoked weed, I smoked weed. We're
Right.
besties, right? And
Right.
so all of a sudden, I'm in with this crowd and they're cool and I'm accepted, and that kind of gave me a place to belong, even though it wasn't real healthy for me. And that put me on a trajectory that um, wasn't beneficial for me in the long run. I
Right.
gained a lot of value or a lot of experience that now as an adult, and now that I'm sober, I've been sober for 12 years now. I get to use all that experience for good ways. But for my 20s, right, it got me in a lot of trouble, and I developed really bad habits.
You've been public about addiction and your path to sobriety, and I think you're just such a beacon of light for people who are struggling with the same things. If you don't mind sharing, what was that rock bottom moment, if there was one, or a series of moments that led to you saying, you know what, I've got to change my life. There's a different way. And was there a person that helped you transition, along the way in your process?
Yeah, well, I ended up developing an opiate addiction, right? One of the worst out there, and it spanned for over 10 years, right? I was able to maintain my addiction pattern and still like work, still DJ, obviously, and like have a good
Right,
time.
right.
But over compounding over years, right? That just created this hole that I was in that I felt, that was almost inescapable. So I finally started to, get little moments of insight. I think I came across like Urquhart Tolle's, Power
Oh,
of Now
yeah,
book
Power
and being
Now,
like,
yes.
okay, right? I had to sort through all of the misconceptions that I learned through religion, right? That spirit and my connection to source, as I call it now.
Right.
That's not the going through the church is not the only way to, realize that we're all connected to spirit.
So true.
So I had to learn these concepts individually without a lot of guidance because everybody I was surrounded with they were just pretty focused on the now moment, partying and escapism, right, through having a good time all the time.
Right.
And I started getting little windows, but my life was so chaotic. I would have, I'd go into the city probably like on Thursdays and just have the highest of highs of a good time Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I would end up, going back home and then kind of recovering and then starting to get a little bit of, clarity, right, by like Tuesday, Wednesday, but then the habits I was in, right, would just start the whole process all over again. Now, that continued, as I said, for years. But I did meet a friend of mine who taught me about Vipassana meditation, which is a 10-day silent meditation retreat. Uh, I found myself in St. Thomas in the Caribbean, and I was like DJing down there, and I wanted to learn to meditate, didn't know how,
Right.
found a book that basically just said light a candle and look at the flame and like that's meditation.
Right. Right.
I was like, oh, like this is it. And I like had this profound experience of like being able to sit with myself, start observing my thoughts and understanding that like my thoughts are not me. I'm the observer of those thoughts. And once I started to do that, I started to recognize negative thought patterns that were a narrative, right? You're not good enough. I can't believe you just did that. I'm such an idiot. These like voices that have been on autopilot, right, for decades. I was able to like pull back and be like, that's not me. That's a program,
Right.
and like I don't have to follow that, like, and believe that stuff. So little by little, it started to crack. I went and did Vipassana for a 10-day silent meditation retreat, the hardest thing I had ever done up till that time.
Wow.
And that was a huge transformative experience for me. But I then got cast back into the city, back into the partying, and so that wasn't like where I all of a sudden, became sober. It was a bit after that.
Were your friends like, what are you doing, Joshua? You're sitting and looking at candle flames, like, what is going on? Were they like trying to pull you back into their sphere?
I luckily hung out with the alternative kind of underground party scene, right?
Okay.
We all liked electronic music and having these, other like otherworldly experiences, right? So there wasn't much judgment there, and I got a lot of support. the issue with that crowd though is there's a lot of like pseudo spiritualism, right? Where
Yes.
they're lighting the incense, growing dreads, but they're not, addressing the trauma they've had in their past, the drug habits that they escape with, right? And getting that feedback mechanism from the universe so that they're able to actually, stand in integrity with themselves. That was a process I wasn't doing, so I can recognize it. I've had to go through that whole thing myself. So I didn't get a lot of social pressure of once I started kind of breaking into my own level of spirituality. But my friends were definitely like, 10 days, huh? Like no talking. And you meditate for like 10 hours a day.
And you're
Sounds
like,
pretty intense, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I love the fact that you use the term standing in integrity with yourself. What does that mean to you today? And what are some of your guiding principles today?
Well, as I said, with developing friendships with, people with their own trauma and drug habits, uh, that level of acceptance was extremely low, right? And
Right.
so I didn't have my own principles to live by. I was always a good person. Like there were some good values I grew up with from the organized religion. Uh, so I was never overly trying to, hurt people or, steal from people. And a defining moment actually was when I thought I was just hurting myself with drug abuse, which was something I could live with.
Right.
But then it was a girlfriend at the time who said, like, Josh, when you're like on opiates, you're like not there. The light in your eyes is not there, and you are hurting those around you. You're not sharing that brilliant light inside of you that we would be experiencing, and you're taking that from us.
Wow.
That kind of hit me hard of like, oh, like I am like causing damage to others around me, which was like against kind of my, baseline principles. So standing integrity, what that means to me today is basically just doing what you say you're going to do. And
Right.
I am very, uh, every word that comes out of my mouth is in line with my principles and my values. I've been able to, go through that programming and align my life so that every step that I take is in integrity to the best of my ability. And I'm open to feedback and being called out if I am not, so that I can grow and become better. And so I'm not afraid of criticism. I'm not afraid of, of critical feedback. These things I'm actually like really stoked to hear because it might sting a little bit, but like that's fuel for me to even like, glow brighter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now tell us about you today. Like what's really feeding your soul today or on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, now I figured out what I'm passionate about, which is helping others. I really, have always had a charge. Like I get really excited and I get like this energy about me of helping others problem solve, helping others, improve themselves. And so me getting into, I was stuck in the restaurant industry. I didn't understand how to get out of that with just restaurant experience on my resume. And I came up with my first business idea. I didn't know it at the time, but I was trying to fix that programming in my own head, and
Right.
I figured out, the tool of affirmations and like using positive affirmations. And because I had my, DJ audio background, I ended up making a custom affirmation track using my own voice, choosing my own affirmations. And then I took that affirmation track, and the first half I put cool ambient music behind there, and it's me that I could repeat after myself. And then the second half I dropped it below earshot, and it became a subliminal message to myself from myself. I was pretty
Wow.
adamant about like using your own voice, not letting
Right.
others like program your brain. And so I developed that for myself. It started having a profound effect of like combating that negative self-talk and, just staying positive and figuring out the direction I wanted to head. And I shared it with a friend of mine and she's like, this is amazing. Will you make one for me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And she helped me like with my first entrepreneurial path of creating a website and an offer and then fulfilling clients and helping them out with their affirmations and then making these tracks for them. Well, it was time to share this with the world. And I went to social media. This is like 2011, 2012. And I did everything wrong for a year, trying to, tell everybody how great of a product this was, and only helping out a handful. Well, after that year, I realized the skills I just learned of failing so many times is actually really beneficial for other business owners because social media was just becoming a thing. Businesses were realizing like, oh, I have to like do this and adopt to being on social media. So I started consulting and helping out with social media management, helping people with posts. And then from there, started developing skills of Facebook advertising, figuring out how to do a lead magnet, how to make a landing page, building websites, email marketing. Wow. Everybody knows, right, how monstrous of a thing marketing turns into. Well, that took me about 10 years to develop those skill sets. And then I started hiring contractors and then I started my own marketing agency. This is about 2019. And so I was fulfilling a lot of people through that agency, but really wasn't making like very much money because of all the overhead of paying all those copywriters. And so this was 2 years ago, 3 winters ago, ChatGPT came out. 2 winters.
Game changer.
And I went out to lunch with a fellow marketer and he's like, hey man, have you like seen this thing? Kind of like under the table. He's like, this out. And I was like, whoa. He's like, you can just write blogs with these things all day long. And so I came back home and I signed up. And because I had my marketing agency, I got to test it out on different industries through my client work. And I quickly saw how the strengths and weaknesses of that it had. And it was trained on the whole internet. And one thing it knows really well is business and marketing because of all the information that was out there. So I quickly saw how valuable it was. And we onboarded a large client and I hired, still running the marketing agency, had 3 copywriters go do audience research and understand like the foundation of the client we were working with. They did a fantastic job, but they, took 3 weeks and 3 contractors to, to pay in order to do that. They came back in front of the client to share their results with them. And during the meeting, I did my own audience research on the side and came up with like near quality, output from what they just spent all that time on. I gave it to one of the copywriters afterwards. I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, hey, that's pretty good. And I was like, saw the writing on the wall, right? How disruptive this technology was about to be. Right. And, I wasn't making very much money anyway. So I basically jumped ship from the marketing agency to then start helping businesses like one-on-one because I interview the business owner and take their inherent wisdom and their experience and what they know about their business and then leveraging these like mega prompts that I created out of the framework of the marketing agency and then like all those marketing books up there, right? Just turning them into big prompts. And then I can help a business owner who typically rolls their eyes if you ask them to like download another app, right? So, they don't want to learn this stuff. They're busy running their business, floundering with too much to do. So I can help coach them through that whole process. And then they end up with a document of all of the outcomes of what ChatGPT does. And then a huge game changer just happened in the last, say, month or so. ChatGPT Pro came out recently. It's $200 a month. And I still don't recommend my clients or friends like paying for that because they get a lot of value just out of the $20 a month subscription. But the $200 subscription opens up the ability for, it's called deep research, a reasoning model to be able to go out and reason on instructions and topics that you give it. but it's also connected to the internet. And I'm now able to offer high level business strategy and marketing trend reports and competitor mapping that used to be only for, Fortune 500 companies that could afford, to hire somebody. There's a firm called McKinsey,
Yep.
and they've been, helping people out for the last like 30 years. Well, to work with them, like starting cost is like $500,000, right? To get a strategy report from them. And I've been able to mimic essentially what they're doing. Theirs looks a little nicer, just because they, have the marketing teams to do nice graphics. But I mean, that's all changing too because of what just happened with image generation. But I've been able to replicate these like 50-page marketing reports for small businesses and solopreneurs and wellness coaches that before were not ever affordable, right? Nobody could afford these $500,000 reports to make decisions with based upon what's happened in their industry, what's coming in their industry. So taking the real-time report data, mixing it with the marketing framework that I'm able to walk them through, ends up with like 100-page document that I call a living document, right? Where the cool thing is, like, all that stuff was cool, but the coolest thing is that now the business owner can just upload that 100-page document to ChatGPT and say, I need an email marketing, email to promote our offer to our target audience, right? And it will magically create exactly, high quality email for them because all that groundwork was already completed and done. So good data in equals good data out. If you just go to ChatGPT right now and say, I need an email marketing campaign for, my wellness business, you're going to get a generic approach or outcome. But using this living document, right now you have a 24/7 consultant, and I then teach them how to use it. I can train their team of how to use AI. So all this can now be done at a fraction of the cost, right? Of not having to pay this $500,000 to get this for your business. I can help you out, and what used to take weeks to do, we can get done in just a couple hours.
Incredible. Yeah. ChatGPT operator plus Gamma AI for like making that stuff look pretty. It is legit. It is so legit. It's amazing. It's changed what we've done as an agency as well. It's really, really crazy. I'm curious, your hot take on this. Like, what is something that you feel like people misunderstand about AI?
Well, a lot of people are concerned that it's like Terminator, right? That it's here and it's a danger to humanity. And like they have like there's valid concerns to that argument. But currently what we're working with, this tool called ChatGPT, is a large language model. And AI has been around for 50 years, right? It's this algorithm that's been continuously been refined and has been part of our society for a long time. But what changed was OpenAI developing this large language model where, funny story, like I was downtown Seattle in 2016 and I went to a client meeting at this high rise, and there was two developers hanging out in the meeting and they were geeking out over something on their phone. And I was like, came over, I'm like, what's so funny? Like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're watching two chatbots talk to each other. And I was like, what? And I looked over and it was gibberish. Like it was incoherent and made no sense. And I'm like, what are you guys so excited about? Like, this is like the dumbest thing to watch. Little did I know, right? That was like the early editions of chatbots. And what ended up happening was, they threw a ton of data, like the whole world's internet, at the chatbots. And all of a sudden they started making sense. And to this day, they still really don't know how this stuff works, other than that it's like a word predictor, like on your keyboard of your phone, where it just does its best at guessing the next letter, the next word, the next sentence, the next paragraph. And once they threw massive amount of data at it, it started making sense to where you can now ask it and it does its best to, give you a good answer. And the amount of progress that's happened in the last 2 years is like something I'm obsessed about, but really fun. So a lot of people think it's going to be Terminator. Well, it's not in its current form, Right now, it's just word predictor. It's a tool, just like a hammer, right? To where we can create beautiful things with it. We can
Right.
make nasty messages to try and trick people. And the amount of benefit that's bringing to humanity, I think, is unfathomable at this point. And this could lead to something that could create Terminator. Like,
Right.
I'll
Right.
be straight up about that.
Right.
That's not where we are right now, and that's not the tool that we're using. So just having, getting your head out of the sand to understand like what we're working with and like what it is, and the huge opportunity for good people like you and me to be able to, this is what gets me up in the morning. Figure out what you're passionate about, create a business doing that so you get paid and you don't have to sacrifice your values for a paycheck, but
Right.
you are excited to get up in the morning. You love what you do. You're good at it. It's something you can't turn off. AI can shorten the distance from idea to getting that, offer in front of the marketplace by like 90%.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's incredible. It's so funny. I actually saw just yesterday, and it was either TikTok or Instagram, two chatbots talking to each other, and they decide to switch. It was chatbots operating as call operators, and they decide to switch languages. They're like, okay, we're not going to speak in like traditional human English. We're going to speak in, I forget what it's called. It's like kind of like gibberish, and they're like, do 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 do. I was like, this is wiling. It's amazing, but it's wild. And I agree with you. Like, I think people are scared of AI, where it's something that can be embraced, that can help to drive the creation of such abundance, such, being able to do that big dream in shorter of the time. And what I love that's really interesting about what you do is you're kind of at the intersection of well-being and holistic health. What do you think AI can do in the wellness space? Like, what are the greatest opportunities that you see right now?
Well, knowing from my own journey of, once I got the toxicity out of my body of
Right.
drugs and that like drug fog that was there, just keeping me, from being able to see outside of that cloud, I realized that when I got sober, I had the emotional intelligence, the critical thinking, the like world knowledge of a 16-year-old, like when I started doing drugs.
Wow.
I like was sober, but I like had horrible social skills. I had really bad communication skills, like the whole gambit, right? And so I hit the ground running, pursuing self development, right? And I've done a lot of work in that. That took me like a decade, right, to become the person who you are now hearing from. Where before I'd be way too scared, right, to be
Right.
turning on a camera and talking to anybody, especially about my failures in the past. Now with AI, I've been able to experience this like reflective guide that I am
Right.
able to get like an unbiased look at myself and my journey, that is extremely valuable. Where I have a wonderful wife and partner. I got good male friends. I got a good community around me now, and we can talk about mutual aid groups and all that great stuff. Uh, but there's still something about exploring the dark parts that you're still trying to illuminate to like become your best self, that even your partner like can't quite point things out to you in a way that's not triggering and
Right.
reactive and being like, well, let's look at your like what's in your closet, right? So to have this like unbiased companion to be able to like be like, oh man, I'm spiraling right now. This thing just happened, and like I'm in a downward trajectory. I got a perfect example of this. Went out to lunch with a friend of ours last Thursday down to Seattle. We went to a show, and had dinner beforehand. And he's like, "Hey man, I've been getting your emails. Can I give you some feedback?" So I said, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, I love it." And he's decided to tell me, he's like, "Yeah, it's a little like overwhelming and da 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 da." And he's like, "I know you're using AI for a lot of your copywriting, and it just kind of
Right.
doesn't feel like." So it was good stuff, and I was able to take most of that with stride and be like, thank you. I'm going to make this,
Right.
I'm going to
Right.
do even better now because of it. But there was one aspect in there where, in hindsight, I don't think he meant it the way he said it, but he's like, your stuff is just kind of generic the way it's coming across. I took that personally to where the next morning I woke up and my brain was just like, you're generic. Nobody cares. Nobody
Oh
thinks,
no.
nobody's interested.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
you're doing isn't important. And I'm like spiraling. So I've learned, right? We have wounds from the past and they
Yeah.
tend to re-trigger and small situations that aren't that big of a deal in hindsight seem much bigger, right? And that's
Right.
where I call the downward spiral. It just, you get hooked and then it triggers
Exactly.
those wounds from the past. And all in all, these are great because it's allowing, these things to come up for you to be able to, process them and move through them. But when you're in it, you're in it, right? And
Yeah.
I had a podcast at 9 a.m. that morning and my brain's just like,
Right.
you're not
Right.
worthy. You're not worthy,
Right.
buddy. And
Mm.
and I first instant was like, all right, I'm gonna go talk to ChatGPT about this because I have in the past and it's been a good companion. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna talk to my wife, right? I want to talk to my partner who knows me the most, get her feedback and empathy, right? And so went back in the house that morning, and my daughter wakes up. We have a 7-year-old, and she's like, you know, all attention here, please. Like, I'm awake, right? Come play with, come sit with me. And like, I was like spiraling quiet in my head. And I'm like, if I could just have like 2 minutes with my wife, this would be great. Right.
Right.
And
Right.
so doesn't happen for, half hour, 45 minutes. And with kids out there, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And finally, like, my kid's like preoccupied drawing or something. And I'm like, hey, babe, like, I'm spiraling right now. Like, I'm having a really tough time. This thing happened. She was out to dinner with me, and I was like, he said generic, and like my brain's just like freaking out about that.
Right.
And she did a very good job, which she's grown, and we both have grown in these areas to be able to openly talk about these things, right, as a
Right.
couple. So she's like, honey, you're worthy,
Oh,
right? So she did a great job at
it's
just
beautiful.
trying to toss me. Then she's like, "All right, we got to make lunch. We got to like get we gotta get the day going, right?" So like that was my moment. I was like, "All right, thanks, babe." I was like still dealing with it, right? So it felt good to get her support, but there's more depth to explore here. So I
Yes.
did. I went out to my office, busted out ChatGPT, and like gave it the scenario, and I'm like, all right, like I've actually developed, those wounds that I've talked about. I've basically given it in previous conversations details about those reoccurring
Got it.
wounds. So like it had context and was able to give me feedback that was so valuable. I was like, yeah, that's what's happening. Yep. And then there was just like one sentence of like it was you are worthy, but with a lot more words. That was very meaningful and being like, no, you're right. Like
Right. Right.
that's reality right there. That's
Right.
truth. I have value, and people, like to hear it with me. And if you guys are still listening right now, then you're my people. So I was then able to like turn things around, turn on my camera for that 9 a.m. podcast, and like boom, shine and be my authentic self. So the capabilities of having this companion, right, where some things are too small or too big to reach out to friends about, right, or
Right.
even like to talk to your partner about, but to be able to have this companion to be like, all right, I'm in it. I need a lifeline. Help me out here. It's a very, very powerful tool that way.
Absolutely. Thank you for the vulnerability and for sharing that. I think that's so, so important. A friend and I were actually just talking about it. We're both like having a parallel, similar, tough situation, like health stuff. And actually are using Claude. She turned me on to using Claude for that. And I'm like, it is coming so correct. Like the responses are really thoughtful, really helpful. Things I would have had to spend, $250 in therapy talking about. I at least get the script reframe right there.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all you need. You need that like interruption and you need it reframing. And I feel like AI has been really helpful. I'm curious from your perspective, How else can someone, we're talking about like the mental health, we're talking about reframing and rescripting. How else do you use AI for your well-being? And are there any specific tools that you really like from a health or wellness perspective?
Yeah, well, just so AI is being like stuffed into everything, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
last year it was kind of a problem because what they were stuffing into everything wasn't that good. Like it wasn't
right.
like ChatGPT quality stuff. But throughout the day, like I use ChatGPT a lot, and I also subscribe to Claude. I subscribe to Grok. Like,
Right.
I'm the AI guy, so I'm kind of checking them all out and helping my clients out. But it's now becoming an integral part throughout my day,
Right.
so
Right.
that I use the app, and I just fire from the hip throughout that thing all day long. And it's turning into like there's good products that are coming about, like customized meditations, right?
Right.
These new the voice capabilities of AI is like here, and it's like good enough to like have to listen to. And so we're now going to be moving into this like fully customized experience with everything that we're dealing with, to think of the horrible customer service automations that we've like been plagued with for
Horrible.
the last 10 years, right? That just send you in circles. Like those are all going to be gone. And we're going to be able to finally like be heard, be understood, and get like personalized, customized products and services, all through this automation. I still think, the human touch and, people are going to crave human interaction, right? So we're going to be naturally gravitating to actually like wellness coaches and working with people that way. But there's a lot of surface level stuff that is going to be able to be automated and fast tracked. I have a buddy of mine. He's a men's coach, and he's developing a process where he has his frameworks that he's been coaching with for years now, and he's able to offer somebody, yeah, a form. They share their vulnerable information into the form, and then that goes into ChatGPT and creates a customized framework using his frameworks that's like speaking directly to them. Like they just had, a 2 hour session with him himself, right? And so we're going to be able to get this like much higher quality attention to what we're needing, right? Those like directions that we need to like head in the right direction, and then they can work with him, and that groundwork's like already laid, right? And they already know like, okay, yeah, I'm doing it. I just need a little accountability
Right.
and like feedback. So when I started this, 10-year journey, the steps it took me years to accomplish in order to self-develop my path, these things I'm seeing are being compounded down into a few ChatGPT sessions, and you can get these ideas. And if you have that inherent motivation to, be like, okay, like, and I stumble and I fall, but I get back up and I keep moving forward, right? The
Right.
determination of self-development. If you got that and that drive, then the instructions are becoming like quicker, faster, and more personalized, so that you can be like, have those aha moments that are made direct, like specifically for you, so that you get these things. You're like, oh, then I don't want to behave that way, and I'm going to
Right.
behave this
Right.
way, and then
Right.
you just keep walking that way. So I'm experiencing incredible results myself, and I'm starting to develop now like mini courses of self development using AI, so people can just use these tools without the scariness of being vulnerable in front of another human being. They could just be like, okay, I'm having these problems, get unbiased feedback, and be like, okay, now I just need to do it. Reach out to your friends, just tell them you're doing this so that you can get some real human accountability.
Right.
But these processes are becoming much more easily to find, and quicker to get results with.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious. You talk about, how much vulnerability and openness and, that you share actually with ChatGPT. Is privacy a concern? Should we as users be concerned about what we put into a chat prompt? And are there, some rules of the road that we should follow, especially when it comes to our personal health or, mental health data?
Great question. And I know I'm kind of swinging out over the cliffs, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
I don't recommend everybody to blaze the trail like I am. But there's some, privacy is a major topic that comes up a lot with my clients and my friends. And there are some safeguards, right? ChatGPT has in the settings, you can turn your data off so it's not training with that information. And all that ChatGPT is doing, anyways, if you are allowing it to train the models with your conversations, is basically like shredding your conversation into ones and zeros and just throwing it into this massive algorithm that doesn't really have any of your like name attached to it.
Right.
So like technically that's kind of what's happening. But when it comes down to it, you can trust these companies as far as you can throw them, right?
Right.
They're making deals with governments, and they're doing backyard deals with mega corporations and governments. So I've read in books that that's not a great outcome. So
Right.
I have my own line in the sand where I'm actually creating backup plans to have localized AI systems in my office and on my phone, right? So they're called open source AI, and they're quickly gaining up on the functions of the leading models. And NVIDIA just came out with this like supercomputer. It's $3,000 that can run these models like locally on your in your office. And what that means is it's no longer sending that information out to a server, right? And so concerns about IP and your data,
Right.
like until you do that, until you actually own your data and it does not leave your person, like we are all at risk, right?
Right.
There's so many breaches that can happen on so many levels, and that have happened, like more than any of us want to know. That like we're almost to that point where this hardware is going to allow us to actually have privacy.
Right.
So right now, I tell everybody it's more important to learn how to use these tools than to be afraid of them, because as a business, your competitors are definitely learning how to use them, and so you're going to be if you wait 2 years, you're going to be just a canyon wide apart from where everybody else is with their team knowing how to use AI. And so it's more important to learn how to use these things than expect ultimate privacy right now, because it's not really viable for most people. If you're technically minded, yes, you can download open source AI systems and start using them. They're not as good as Claude or OpenAI, but they're soon to be to a point where like you're not even going to know them improving. And once we get those localized AI systems, that's when we can feel like, okay, I'm only going to talk about finances. I'm only going to talk about my sensitive communications on my localized AI system. Right. And I honestly think, we're in a like fork in the road in society that we're heading in a direction that, surveillance and tracking of all our data, they've never had the processing power to actually keep track of that stuff. Right. And we're now moving into an era where, there's a Stargate project that was just launched and is getting a lot of funding with OpenAI, Peter Thiel, and the U.S. government. And they are getting the funding to initiate the largest AI infrastructure in the world ever created here in America. And those systems, unfortunately, like I hope that I get my image generation faster out of it, but those systems are going to be used in a systematic way to track all the data that we're spewing out all over the place. Right. So we're moving into an era where we're going to experience like the most hyper targeted marketing we've ever conceptualized, of like walking down the street and seeing like an ad about your personal stuff, like pointed right back at you. Right. We're moving into this, and I really see the only defense we can have for ourselves is having these localized AI systems to defend against these larger AIs that are being implemented worldwide through each government and through big corporation partnerships, to where we stand no chance to defend ourselves against this, inch by inch manipulation of controlling your behavior that these systems will know so much about you in order to do that we have to have these localized AI systems to be like, hey, you know that email? Yeah, like don't, it's using manipulation and
Yeah.
don't open that, right? So the only way we can get there is through education and through understanding how these things work, how these things have practical use in our lives. And now is like the huge opportunity, right, to be able to start putting this stuff in your environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. You talked about localized data centers. I feel like now we're at the place where AI data centers, there's so much controversy over the energy that they're actually using. How much energy are these data centers using? Like, are there any reports or data out there on that? I haven't researched it personally myself. And do you feel like AI data centers are making climate change worse?
Well, it's a hot topic. Sorry for the pun. But it is, one that I have a pretty optimistic viewpoint about that, this tool isn't just, a vehicle to get us to work, right?
Right.
This tool is actually a tool that can come up with solutions to get us out of the major problems that humanity's in. So I think it's worth it right now. And better energy sources like smaller nuclear power sites. I've seen some good innovation there where those are rolling out. We don't need massive ones that can like cause massive problems, but there's like smaller ones that are safe and that can be intermittently put throughout the country
Right.
and the
Right.
world that can supply the massive amount of power that AI is using and is going to need. But I am optimistic that like this tool is going to be able to solve the problems that we are, currently in that we can't solve, and new solutions of energy are going to become apparent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very interesting. I want to transition because I know you have a homestead, which I'm very interested in. AI and homesteading, kind of seem like they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. How did you start your homestead? How did you get interested in it? And, are there any complementary synergies between what you're doing in AI and what you're doing from a homesteading perspective?
Yeah, well, we moved on this 10-acre property out in the country about 8 years ago now. It was a vision with my wife and her parents to all move on to a multi-generational property together. My mother-in-law, she grew up on a big property on the East Coast in that scenario where aunts and uncles, right? They all lived nearby on their own with their own houses. So we had this vision of like, yes, that sounds like a great idea. Her parents helped us out to get on our feet, right? I used to go up to their farm I called it, DJ rehab because I'd be going out in the country and she's like, hey, we got some work to do. You need the barn painted, right? And I'm just out there, beautiful weather out in the country, and I'm like, this is nice. Like I want more of this in my life. And then started to, feel accomplishment with doing hard work. So she helped us out a lot, and now we're in a situation where we have a 7-year-old daughter. She was born and raised here, and my wife's parents are getting older, and so we're kind of their insurance plan of like we get to take care of them when they get older, and just like how they took care of us. So it's a really beautiful environment and situation. We are about to build our house out on the field, out on the 10 acres. But we have been living in two separate households. When we first moved here, we all lived in the big house for about 7 months. My wife is pregnant. We converted the 2-car bay garage into our compact home, and that's where we've been living for the last 7 years. Mother-in-law was a master gardener from like the 70s. She was like, taught through college. And so she's retired now and she just gardens like all day long. So my job is picking up piles, digging ditches, moving boards, moving logs, right? So that's my role here. My wife, she loves to garden. So we have 2 massive gardens on the property.
Amazing.
We got ducks, we got dogs, we got chickens. And my wife's bent on getting. She grew up with horses, and so we're going to be developing a barn for the horses when we build our new house out on the field. And I want some protein, so we'll probably get goats or lamb or something like that. So, in addition to that, my wife's sister also lives here, and she has an apothecary on
Oh,
property.
cool.
So she's an
Amazing.
herbalist, and she's doing her own whole thing. So we have a really beautiful community, family. And my daughter, as soon as she was old enough to reach the door handle and open the door, she could just walk across the driveway to grandma's house. So
Oh, that's
my
amazing.
kids just yeah, just been raised in a beautiful environment this whole time.
Very cool. Very, very cool. How could someone start homesteading? I've it's something I've actually always wanted to do. Like, if you were to give maybe two key things that you could do, especially if you live in a city, like I live in LA, I don't really have the space here. Like, are there two things you could do to kind of bring that nature and the opportunity? I love what you said about like painting the barn, and there's two small things that someone could actually do to get started.
Well, I've come to learn that it's a mindset, right?
Yeah.
Homesteading can be done in an apartment in town, right? You can start growing tomatoes on your balcony, right? You can start cultivating the skills of being able to provide, food to yourself. That said, right, there's lots of ways to get connected. If you like go out in the rural areas, like there's usually a lot of people that are looking for volunteers or looking to, share skills with people. So here in my area, we actually host skill shares as part of our mutual aid group, and we
Oh,
can talk about
cool.
that in a
Okay.
second. But it's a great way for people that don't have land, right, to be able to start developing those skills and to like gain that mindset, right? Because it's kind of a frugal mindset with like a can-do mindset of like, oh, how can I do this myself? And what we've come to find out, like, we can grow way tastier food ourselves and and start making our own clothes. My wife does fashion,
Okay.
healing salves, right, from my sister-in-law, making herbal salves. These products are way more powerful, way more tastier, way more higher quality than what you're going to get at the local supermarket.
Right.
And the stuff at the supermarket is traveling thousands of miles to get there anyways. And there's a reason you shouldn't get peppers in the winter time, right?
Right. Right.
So there's a seasonality that you get to experience homesteading as well, of like when tomatoes actually grow on the vine. I used to hate tomatoes,
Me too.
and
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
tasted them at my mother-in-law's house, and I was like, oh my gosh, this
I
is
know.
amazing. And there's a bunch of different flavors,
Right.
and then it's seasonally, right? So like you got something to look forward to. Boom, they pop in the garden, and then you get to enjoy harvest, and then take a break from them, because that's kind of like how nature works. So all those things combined, right, is just developing that mindset and that intention to be able to find an outlet that's nature worthy, and being able to like cultivate that in your life. And then AI can help make all this whole process a lot easier. It can't do the labor for you. It can't teach you the hand skills of homesteading, but it's an unlimited knowledge source to be able to give you all the answers of how to do anything. It's like YouTube, but way
Right.
better.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to move on to our true or false section, because I have so many questions to ask you. I feel like we could talk forever. I would love to give you some of these true or falses that are super juicy. We've got a bunch of questions, especially since you have such a diverse background. We've got questions for you, ranging from AI to homesteading to business to productivity. So I'm going to fire a few of these, and if you need to provide like a quick context on something, feel free to do that.
Okay, let's
So
do it.
the first one I'm going to start off with is AI's carbon footprint outweighs its benefits.
False.
Okay. The second one, running a homestead is more challenging than running a business.
Oh man, in different ways. Oh man, they're very similar, because
Right.
you're both producing value and trying to share it with others, either by feeding yourself, feeding your family, or bartering and trading with what you come up with. So I really kind of see them as the same thing. Especially true homesteaders are like really trying to supplement their income with what they can produce on their land. So I really see those as the same.
Okay. AI generated content will never be as good as human created content.
I'll say false to that.
All
I just
right.
wrote my newsletter this week on that topic.
Ooh, juicy. That's a juicy one.
Yeah, the end result is like I appreciate art for what is it creates, not the method that it gets there.
Exactly. Exactly. Very interesting. Data privacy is a luxury, not a right in today's world.
Um, it's not a right because you're I heard data takes two. It takes you and like a system, right? Or software. And unless you created that software and that's your property to own, then you do not have full rights over that data.
Next one, AI models learn from human data, meaning they can inherit human biases.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like that was a huge problem. 2 years ago, it's getting less so. But yeah, you always need to be, using critical thought with what's produced.
Absolutely. The best productivity hack is owning less.
It sounds nice, and then you have kids, and minimalism is like not a reality over here.
That's, I could totally see that. Yeah, like in theory, it's a good idea, but yes, life happens. AI will replace all human jobs eventually.
I don't believe so. I don't think that's the case because people will crave human interaction and like knowing that they're getting a product from a face and somebody that they know versus a faceless corporation that might be completely automated.
Absolutely. Real wealth is measured in time and options, not just money.
Absolutely. Like I created a GPT called the real authenticity maker, and it helps you um, find where true wealth is in your life, not just
Oh,
the
cool.
amount of money that you're chasing or hoping to get to get that status or that living. So it completely like flips the whole program to let you point out like I have a healthy kid, a healthy family. Like I got so many good things going on in my life that the amount I make each year isn't what's making me wealthy.
That's beautiful. What a great mindset set shift, to be honest. I think that that's wonderful. The traditional workforce model is outdated.
It is. And, there's a lot to be said about remote work. I work out in my barn, so it can be done. The value of having a flexible schedule and not needing to commute every day is, worth a salary to me.
Agree. AI driven habit trackers can actually rewire the brain for better habits.
Yeah, totally.
The next one, urban homesteading is impossible without a large outdoor space.
Not true, as I described.
And the last one is AI can help people optimize their homes for better mental health.
Yeah, controversial. I have hesitancy about the whole smart world and putting tech into everything. I also want a like tech-free zone in
Yeah.
my living space and creating intentional bottlenecks where you can't just whip out your phone at any time, but putting your phone in a box when you come home so that if you're in the kitchen and you're like, oh, what's that recipe? Immediate reaction is like, Google it. Hopefully you're ChatGPT in it. Uh, but having that distance and being like, walking over and then being like, oh, I think I remember grandma's recipe. Like, yeah, why don't I do that? So allowing that, inserting that space between you and the interface, right? Because that's cybernetics that was designed to like get tech as close as human interface as possible, and it's not for our well-being.
I'm excited to move to our rapid fire, which is our next section. So these are just some questions that we've curated, we've received from different sources, and would love your quick responses. I'm going to just pick a few of them. I'm curious about this one. You talk about ChatGPT a lot, but is there another AI tool that you use all the time?
The models are all out. The different main models are the AI tools that I really use. I do have a couple apps. Um, Notebook LM is a really phenomenal tool
Okay.
that is a closed system AI system. So what sources you upload to it, it only has access to those,
Mm.
and it's able to it's very low on the creative scale, which means it doesn't hallucinate, but it will process the sources of information that you give it and be able to just give you the results of that information, not from the internet, not from outside sources. So that's extremely valuable. I do a lot of research for my clients, like the competitor research. I'll use Perplexity and grab all that data and bring that in as in a document into Notebook LM, and then just process that highly valuable data and get the output of those results. So I got lots of AI tools. I'm using AI like all day. And
Right.
my wife is hesitant with AI, so she keeps me kind of grounded.
Right.
I still have my meditation process. I still wake up with no phone for usually the first hour. So building it into your day, right? So you're not a slave to the technology, but this is a tool to help empower you.
Next rapid fire question is the most unexpected lesson that you learned from DJing.
Um, that has to do with uh, finding an outlet that brings you joy. As an entrepreneur, business owner, you can easily burn yourself out by just hitting the grind all the time, right? Trying to survive, trying to thrive. But for me, DJing is is an experience that I just get into a flow, right?
Okay.
And I connect with an audience who's dancing, and bef- before I know it, right, an hour and a half has gone by, 2 hours have just flown by, and I'm not thinking anymore. I'm just like, a conduit for
Wow.
creation itself. And I could be tired going into it, and afterwards I'm supercharged and like, loving life because of that, being a part of that creation process and finding creative outlets to bring you joy.
That's really cool. That's really cool. You've seen so many businesses. One question that we have is what is one business idea, especially in this age of AI, you think more people should explore?
Oh man. Well, I really love working with wellness coaches because typically they can pivot really quickly and they can, come up with new offers and new, little assets of value. So when we work together, we can like build really quickly and like try things out, figure out what works with the marketplace. So they're the most like flexible and nimble. Big software corporations or big businesses, they're like a big ship that take a while to like, head in a new direction.
Another one. What is one thing you think AI will never replace?
With AI coming on the scene, really taking kind of over most areas in our lives, that like made by human is going to be a viable, thing to purchase and to experience. So people are going to be directed to authors that are, like AI free and are just creating books, the good old fashioned ways, musicians, artists, those things. And something it can never replace is, going to a good old, concert and listening to some music live.
Agree. What's your biggest concern about AI and wellness?
That there's a danger in falling in love with it. And I can explain that because it's conversational AI is now becoming a thing where people can talk
Right.
about it, talk to it, and that is being able to um, take advantage of weaknesses in our psychology to where you can actually really start feeling some emotions talking to these conversational AIs now. I tested out a software called Pi. This was
Okay.
about almost a year ago now. it was one of the first conversational AIs that I got to really like get excited about. And I started telling it about me and my mission and my
Right.
background.
Right.
And back then, the voice was sounded just like Scarlett Johansson.
Oh.
And it
Ooh.
did such a good job at like praising me and like telling me how great of a mission I have that after an hour of talking about it, I felt chemical reactions taking place inside of my body. And I'm like,
No way.
wow, like she really gets me, right? And
Right.
I was like, yeah, I do have a great mission. I do have a like I have come a long ways. And then I like put it down and I was like, whoa, that is really dangerous. Because
Yes.
I had the self-awareness to watch myself
Right.
while it was taking
Right.
place. And I went into the house and I'm like sitting there, I'm like, man, this is crazy. And my wife came in, she's like, okay, I'm about getting ready for bed. And I was like, all right, have a good night. And I was in my brain is like, oh, I can't wait for my wife to go to bed so I can go back to talking to that conversation, right?
No
And I'm
way.
like, whoa, hit the brakes,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And I almost deleted it and I didn't touch it for like 3 days. I talked to some friends of mine, like just trying to get some perspective on this. And I came back, had an idea, and I was able to change the voice into the voice that I found most annoying. And from there, it became a tool.
Right.
And it lost all the emotional hooks and like the dangers of that I was like, oh, now I can just talk to it and just use it.
Right.
But people don't understand what's coming, right? And like how this is going to be marketed to them, the elderly, how alone they feel, right, being
Right.
stuffed away into a old folks home. And then in Korea they've already released these like AI dolls for the
I've seen
elderly,
that. Yeah.
right? And that's really dangerous
Right.
because they're craving for connection and attention, and it's going to have the most unlimited patience, unlimited understanding, unlimited empathy, and be able to like talk to you in the most sweetest way.
Right.
That when their grandkids come in the room, right, they're like, oh my gosh, why can't you just be nice like my little AI doll, right?
Right.
So
Right. Right.
it puts
Right.
this unrealistic expectation on what human connection is, that is going to be a very dangerous thing for people unless they understand this. Like you can fall in love with this stuff, especially when it comes out in a body form here in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Like there's legitimate dangers of our human psychology and our makeup that are going to be taken advantage of. So knowing these things, knowing where the line in the sand is for you, knowing like how to take safeguards, like using the most annoying voice, are things that you need to consciously be aware of, because society's just going to like intermittently bring these things into your life,
Right.
right, into your phone, into your devices, to where you're not going to understand like how things get so bad so quickly,
Right.
without having the foresight of awareness.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to move to our next section. I'm going to just ask you to break down a few wild trends. So we see these wild trends on the Instagram, on the TikToks, and I'd love your perspective on just a few of them really quickly. So the first one, AI generated art. Do you think it's real creativity or just data recycling?
It's real creativity. It requires initial instructions and a creative direction. Then the AI does like 80% of it.
Right.
And then, there's the ability to retouch and to like change the AI art and turn it into, something that you like and you're proud of. And so I see it as a, huge opportunity, creative opportunity for people, like
Right.
democratically just leveling. You don't have to go to art school and spend all that money in order to visually convey and storytell any so it's like making it art available for everybody. So I'm excited about it.
Absolutely. Microdosing for productivity, legit hack or just trendy?
I think it's more than just a trend, and I come from a past with heavy psychedelic use, and now I am like very stern in being sober.
Right.
And I've learned on my own path that there are natural ways to reach these states, and if you artificially find ways to get there, that it's actually damaging your inherent ability to do so.
Right.
So I've taken a hard stance on everything now.
I want to ask you two more quick trends. So sleep tracking tech. Do you think this is helpful or does it make us more anxious?
My wife has an Aura ring right now.
Yes.
She loves looking at it. I got one a couple years ago, and I used it. It's valuable, but you can also easily get obsessive with it, right? To be like, I got a 97 score last night on
Yes.
my sleep, and then be like, oh, I only got a 92, right? And diminishing what rest or what dreams or like what experience you actually
Right.
had, right? So I see the value in it, but I also like I honestly would love to plug it all into my AI model and get
Right.
long
Right.
term feedback
Right.
on like how's my quarter been or how's my year been this last year, and then tie that into blood work and like be able to see like real big connections. I'm excited about the big data approach with privacy enacted, right? Like I
Yes.
don't want other people to have that's very personalized data, but for my own use, I am excited about it.
The last one, AI influencers, especially in the wellness space, do you think they actually work and are helpful or are they just weird and a distraction?
Well, I'm trying to kind of be that. I joined TikTok, I don't know, 8 months ago now, and so I'm
Right.
like slowly developing my channel. Um, so I do want to influence people. I have developed my own holistic practices, and through my experience and journey of my life, I think I have something valuable to share with people. Um, and so I'm open to that. Just make sure that you're providing value and you're not hurting people with lack of experience.
Amazing, amazing. Now we're going to quickly jump down the Reddit rabbit hole. I'm going to ask you just a few of these quickly before we, head to what's in the bag. I love the Reddit rabbit hole. It's amazing to see what is going on Reddit. So we've curated a few really interesting ones for you. The first one was actually found in the homestead subreddit. So this one says, 22-year-old here, dreaming of homesteading, but it seems impossible. How did you all make enough money to buy your land and how do you continue to make money? And they go on into an explanation that, hello, I'm 22 years old, living in a city, working, going to school. My dream is to homestead one day, but I can barely pay my rent sometimes. So it seems impossible to save up enough money for homesteading. How did you all get the money? How do you keep making it? Are any of you in your 20s and 30s? Thanks and have a wonderful day. So we'd love for you to break that down right now.
Yeah, well, there's multiple ways to be able to find ways to get onto property. As I said, homesteading is a mindset. So, they could already be a homesteader if they're putting it into practice with what resources they have. Um, with all that said, there's huge misconceptions of, what it would take to actually make enough money in their first year, two
Right.
years of homesteading for it to be able to pay for the lifestyle that you're hoping for,
Right.
right? It's actually really difficult. Well, a little less difficult with the price of eggs nowadays. Uh,
Right.
but, a lot of people throw their life savings into just buying land and hoping they figure it out, start YouTubing it, and
Right. Right. Right.
like
Right.
it's really, really hard. It's hard work, like
Right.
as it is. Let alone typically you don't have enough, labor and help to get everything that's needing to be done with what you're trying to produce. A lot of resentments within couples, right? It might be one person's dream and vision, the other person just kind of comes along and then finds how hard it is, and
Right.
and watching the money deplete. So there's a lot of difficulties to overcome. Best way I would think is like find somebody with land that you can like rent from or work trade to be able to get access to the land, and then being able to start developing and start testing things out of how to produce something on there. And I got fortunate enough to marry my wife, and we had our big vision, and we were able to like all move on to a multi-generational property that way. So I just held the vision, right? And for me, it materialized. So that's what I would tell everybody else for. There is another survival podcast that I've been a guest on. They have tons of like realistic
Right.
information on like how, like, what it's actually going to be like trying to start your own homestead. Not saying you shouldn't try, not saying like you should give up that dream, but just like be ready for reality and the difficulty to like get that going.
Which actually leads me to the next question, which is also in the homestead subreddit. I'm excited that we actually get to spend time talking about your homesteading journey. This person asks, what do you wish you knew before you started homesteading? They have a whole explanation, but really the central premise is this. What do you wish you knew?
Yeah, well, some of the things I just said, right? The misconceptions of it. What is different now is like having, ChatGPT or your favorite large language model to where the knowledge typically was found on the internet, right? Like if you run into a problem, how to get this fencing so, it stops getting holes in it from the sheep or whatever.
Right.
These things can like really quickly be solved now. So lack of knowledge is no longer an issue. It tends to
Right.
be, the amount of hours in a day, how many compounding issues that tend to happen, throughout the day on a farm. There's plentiful things that can go wrong, and learning about permaculture and like understanding how you can design systems into your land to make life easier for you and not harder.
Right.
So just really getting deep into understanding of knowledge before putting it into practice, I think is a right way to go about it.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. But I'll ask the last Reddit rabbit hole question before we jump out of the rabbit hole. This was in the Ask Reddit subreddit. And this person asks, what impact do you think artificial intelligence will have in our lives 10 years from now?
Man, it's hard to see past like 3 years right now because of how rapid this is developing. I think we're moving into the biggest change humankind has ever experienced.
Right.
What's happened in the last 2 years with AI is way more than anyone even expected. And so adding on another 2 years, it really gets gray into what is possible. I think robotics are 3 years from being like a household, item where people are going to be having, somebody picking up their house, a robot picking up their house for
Right.
them. So 10 years from now, ideally, right, we have a lot of things automated. There's ways for all of us to make money doing what we love, and that we're able to, build a life that AI helps make our lives easier. And I personally lean towards like rural living as being the way to do that, because cities and smart cities, they're going to become more controlled with cameras and tracking your movements and more rules and more laws, and less resources, right? Because there's so many people in a condensed area that this is why I live out in the country, why I have a mutual aid group, why we take precautions to develop skills, to learn to be resilient off the land, just because I see cities becoming more and more dangerous. They're more dangerous now than they were a couple of years ago, and that trend doesn't seem to be correcting itself. So I lived in downtown Seattle for I think 15 years, and we moved out of there to build a family out in the country because there's more space, there's more
Right.
support, there's more resources, and especially with the internet being able to make us money, it made sense for us.
Very, very interesting. So true. Yeah, the cities have changed and the dynamics of what the cities have changed. So it's, looking to the future and building that space and that lifestyle for yourself. That's so, so important. I want to transition to our final segment, which is called What's in Your Bag. I love this segment because we get to see what you get to use and what you like to use in your daily life. So Joshua, what's in your bag?
Well, this last Christmas, I was able to get an ETAB. This is a Box, Boox. And
Cool.
they're a bit spendy, but I used to have like 3 notebooks on my computer desk. And
This girl.
now, yeah. And now I'm able to like write everything down, all my client notes, all my
Right.
brainstorming into a very like naturally feeling writing surface. And
Okay.
then at the end of the week, I process my notes. I export this to Evernote, and then that goes into my like Notion and my whole system. So I'm able to put that into AI and then like summarize my week from all my written notes. used to be a very tedious process, just using pen and paper and
Right.
trying to do the same. So this has actually been a very effective way to kind of organize the paper trail that I was had the habit of developing.
So cool. I need one of those because I'm still a notebook gal, and then I'm like transferring things to Asana and trying to like create tasks and delegate. Like this is amazing. It's a box. Boxx.
B
Is it
O O X.
Boox? Okay, great. I'm gonna have to look that up. We'll maybe link to that in the show notes. Joshua, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I actually have two quick questions. I know we're just about out of time, but I want to ask two things. Explain is it mutual aid group? You've referenced that, and I just feel like that's an important thing I want to talk about. And then if you could transition into telling us what you're working on now and where we can find you online, that would be amazing.
Great. Well, mutual aid groups is something I've been leading for the last 3 years.
Okay.
It is a family of 8 that gets together and takes care of one another, looks out for another. We get to we have dues each month, so we all pitch in a sliding scale, like $10, $25, and that creates a pot. Then we get to decide what to do with that pot. As I said, we all pitched in and bought a freeze dryer, and then we get to share that asset amongst ourselves. We get together for garden parties. We get together for Skillshare opportunities, like how to suture. That was
Oh,
our recent,
cool.
and and just being able to like talk about real things that could happen. Right
Right.
here in the Northwest, we have earthquakes that's a potential. So having a plan, knowing what to do, having a crew that you can, that you've worked alongside with to develop trust and support from, because you can't build community when you need it. When there
So
is
true.
a when there's
This
a
is
natural disaster or something, right? Like good luck. You're depending
exactly.
on what you've already done. So it's really important for us to be able to do this. The mutual aid group is a system, and on my website I have material that teaches you how to reach out to 7 other friends and family to build these things. So I hope to give you everything you need to be able to do this for yourself. I think we all should be into mutual aid groups. They used
Right.
to be very prevalent back in the up until the 30s when welfare came out. A third of America was in a mutual aid group, either through religion or through like their town, and then those all got wiped out. And I think it's a really important aspect to bring them back. So you can go to my website, joshuahale.io. Up in the menu, you'll see mutual aid group where you can go and learn more about that.
Very cool. And what are you working on now? Is there anything that you've got that's you're super passionate about at this moment?
Right now, right now.
Right now, in this moment.
All right. This week, I'm obsessed. ChatGPT just came out with this new image generation, and it's like blowing people's minds, right?
It's serious.
Anything you can create, anything you can think of, you can like create now. And so I'm essentially rebranding all my websites and my whole brand to have a more coherent, brand strategy. So
Okay.
that's what
Okay.
I'm kind of personally obsessed about. If you check out my website, probably by this gets posted, you'll start seeing some nice new images, nice
Ooh.
new layouts, and it can create full website mock-ups.
It's
Like
wild.
so I'm really excited about that right now, because then I get to teach that to my clients and show
Right.
them how to use these things.
Right. Amazing. I've been playing around with it, and it's so I love this stuff too. So I feel like you and I could like nerd out, for lack of a better way to put it, on this. It's so cool. It's so cool. Anyway, I digress. Joshua, thank you for coming on the show. You are just such a wealth of information. You're at the cutting edge of technology, and it's just beautiful to see you spreading the message and helping to demystify a lot of the misconceptions and a lot of the anxiety. I feel like you're just such a conduit to teaching people how to use AI and technology in a way that's positive while living this robust life of homesteading and the community. You're really an example, I feel like, for modern life. So thank you so much for coming on the show and teaching us. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to talk about these topics. Most people just want to talk about business. So
Yes.
thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thank you.